Hi, I'm Bug Hall, and you may remember me from such TMZ articles as Bug Hall arrested for huffing duster. There's the mugshot in case you've forgotten. Just kidding. I'm not going to edit this video. It's just a conversation between me and my phone. Um, First of all, why did it take me this long to publicly say anything about it? At first, it was mainly because I didn't want to turn this into a sideshow. I didn't want to use this as an opportunity for publicity, and um, I I knew that if I did ever come out and talk about this, I wanted to just tell the truth, and the truth actually took some time for me to work out. So here we are, 5, 6 months later. This is the longest 5, 6 months that I've gone without working since I was 8 years old. I've just taken the time to talk to a lot of people that I consider wise. Some good friends of mine. Um, they've been generous enough to lend me their time and lend me their ears and help me work through my own thoughts on this. So I grew up in Texas, a normal kid. Um, and what very few people, nobody at the time certainly knew, was that my biological father had been sexually abusing me for a long time, for a few years. He eventually went to prison for those same crimes against someone else's kid. And I just went on with my life. And then Steven Spielberg was casting for a movie called Little Rascals. Some of you might have seen it. And as you know, I got the job. I had never auditioned for a movie before. I had a big open call. I grew up watching the original Our Gang, and I had a pretty good Alfalfa impersonation, and I cut my rat's tail off. It was the early 90s. And I went in and got the job. So I remember at the time, even kind of consciously, I remember thinking, like, I felt liberated. I felt like I had been removed from, the kind of horrors or the emotional distraught I had over where I was and what I had been through. And that grew exponentially as the process went on. After all the table reads and the wardrobe fittings and weeks of rehearsal, my excitement just continued to grow and grow and grow. And I remember the very first day of filming. I still have this crystal clear memory. I remember strutting into my honey wagon, which is a big trailer with all the smaller trailer cubicles, for the actors to get dressed in, and it all just felt right. I remember being like, this is exactly where I'm supposed to be, and everyone was so kind and so generous. And I walked to set, the second AD or third AD, whoever it was, rushed me to set. And the first scene we were filming was the scene where me and Travis, Spanky, stole the washing machine engine for the go-kart, for the Blur 2. And so I'm in like overalls or whatever, and they put us in the little laundry room, and they close the door, and they start filling it up with bubbles, right? They put in this big tube, and it's just pumping bubbles in. Suds are filling up to here. And I just remember right then, very consciously, just being so overwhelmed with joy. And I remember thinking, this is what I'm going to do the rest of my life. This is all I want to do. I want to just be right here. And that never faded. That's still how I feel about my work. Whether it's acting or writing or my work as a development executive. I love storytelling. But shortly after that day, a week, 2 weeks, I don't really know exactly how long, two men from that set began sexually abusing me. And I've thought a lot about that. I've thought a lot about how these predators have some sort of sixth sense for vulnerable kids, right? Or predators of other kinds, having a sixth sense for just vulnerable people. And I remember feeling very angry. I still remember really being consciously aware of the fact that, at least how I perceived it at the time, 8 years old, that somebody wasn't protecting me, that I was supposed to be protected, and that went on. The abuse went on from movie to movie, from project to project for quite a few years after that, and it's something that I've only spoken about with a handful of people over the years. But eventually I did what I think all children who are victims of sexual abuse, or I guess any kind of abuse, what I've noticed, the pattern that I've noticed, is that they tend to find some sort of alt group of some sort, a group that looks dangerous, a group that's welcoming to anyone. It's kind of like those poisonous lizards in the Amazon, right? The bright colors to warn people to let the other animals know they're dangerous. And I think that's a very common thing. That's just my observation. So for me, for some people it's the goth or the punk rock or the metal groups or whatever. For me, it was kind of I started hanging around with the crew. A lot of these guys are sort of old biker guys, and I just kind of gravitated in that direction. For a long time, I was under the impression that my alcoholism and drug use were a kind of self-medication. Years later, when I was trying to work through this stuff, I am not so sure of that anymore. Now it kind of looks to me more like the process by which I was seeking protection. The price was to do the things that these people do, to be part of the group, and the group drinks and does drugs, and you just want to be part of that safety net, right? That safe environment. And so I got rowdy and for a lot of years I had what people would call what do you call it, disobedience, emotional disorders or whatever. I was always angry and aggressive, and I think that's sort of an exterior thing that kids like I was adopt. So flash forward, the abuse stopped once I adopted that sort of exterior disposition. I guess I was no longer seen as an easy target. But the drug use and the alcoholism continued for a long time. I eventually got sober when I was 24. I was sober for 6 years with no issues of any kind. And during that time, I was doing a lot of introspection and kind of relearning who I was, and a lot of the potential that I had squandered was sort of coming back to me. I was starting to sort of realize what life could be. But I was also realizing that I had a lot of contradictions, moral contradictions in my behavior. Womanizing, particularly, and that was eating at me for a long time. It was really hard for me to work that out. And then I met a Catholic priest. I met a man who was an exorcist, which, to a secular world that just sounds crazy, but he was based out of Oklahoma. He's now in Denver. And within a conversation of him, one conversation with him, I sort of all the pieces came together for me. And I realized that what I had been taught my whole life about what it means to be a man and what it means to be strong and independent and all these things were largely skewed, almost like I had been propagandized for a long time. And the truth was much simpler. The truth was rooted in what morals really are, right? So I converted to the Catholic faith. I'm a Catholic, and that's my original experience. I'm not a big fan of faith-based movies, but and in a lot of those, when people have these come to Jesus moments, whatever, there are always these very strange tears of joy and the clouds part. And that wasn't really my experience. I was actually, when I realized the truth, I was angry for a little while. I was angry for quite a few months. And the Catholic history and the Catholic faith, the Catholic Church is the most beautiful thing in the history of the world. So there was a lot of joy and happiness as well, but I was angry that I had been lied to for so long. And eventually that anger subsided, and I just embraced my love of this new thing that I found. I wanted to talk about it all the time. I went to Mass every day, and it was really transformative for me. And some people that I started working with shortly afterwards who thought like me, who believed the same things I believed, they quickly kind of gave me this new idea, that yes, you're excited and you want to talk about the faith and you want to just share it joyfully with everyone around you, but we can't do that, right? If you're going to work with us, all of those truths and any truths that flow forth from that faith have to be a secret. We're fighting a clandestine war. This is the narrative that I was told. We're fighting this clandestine war. Everyone in Hollywood is our enemy, and if they knew who we were, or what we thought, or what we believed, we'd be out. And how can we do any good if we're out, right? If we're cast out of Hollywood, we can't do any good. And I had kind of experienced that. I had had to turn down a few jobs because I no longer wanted to, get naked on screen or, do different things that were in conflict with my conscience. And I was okay with that. People go make the movies they want to make, and if my talents and my ability to do the job doesn't match up with what they need, then it's not the job for me. But I was excited to move into this new phase and to be writing and doing these other things. And I also did a few jobs acting wise along the way. I was in Romania for a few months. But this narrative, this idea that we shouldn't talk about our faith, we shouldn't talk about what we believe, I really bought it hook, line, and sinker. And the reality is I saw that contention growing, right, in the industry around me. More and more, I started noticing that nobody with what you might call traditional values speaks out in any way. Whereas let's call them the new value system, right? The values that have sort of cropped up over the last 70 years, 60 years. Those are spoken about and expressed and promoted with impunity. They're, It's just taken for granted that, you know, you can say those things. And that was a difficult thing for me to navigate. And I wasn't happy with it or comfortable with it. Something was irking me about this. And these people that I was working with, you know, kept that narrative up. Clever as foxes, innocent as doves. We're fighting a clandestine war. Yes, we believe all these things, but we can't tell anyone. We can't say what we think about abortion. We can't say what we think about gay marriage. We can't say what we think about trans ideology, or you know, Marxist identitarian politics, or feminism. What else? You know, critical race theory, whatever. All these things that have sort of permeated into everything in our industry. We can't talk about those things. So be quiet, stay in your place. And it was shortly after that that I had my first relapse. And I had been sober, you know, clean and sober for so long, I just kind of shrugged it off as, I don't know what happened. I don't know what that was. It took me by surprise. Okay, well, let's get up and go to confession, move on. And a year later, it happened again. And I took it a little more serious that time, but I still couldn't figure out what was going on. All the while, these people that I was working with were not living out this idea of fighting for some greater good, for the good of all mankind. All right, they were defrauding dozens and dozens of people of their agreed upon wages, refusing to pay people contracts that had been signed, asking them to rip up contracts for deferred pay on projects, lying to investors, lying to potential business partners, other development executives. And the few times that I tried to speak up, barely, right? I mean, I barely made a peep. I was very quickly shut down, and that was easy for them to do because I was a coward. I had grown accustomed, I had habituated cowardice with my silence. And, you know, the problem is all these people that I was working with, who I have a genuine affection for, who I really love, regardless of their lifestyle or beliefs, I wasn't treating any of them as dignified. Being duplicitous, being subversive, lying, that isn't how you treat people you love. And there's a lot of people that'll use the idea of like, well, if it's not nice, then it isn't love, but I don't really think that's true. Niceness is superficial, right? Love is sometimes hard. Sometimes it just requires the truth, because that's, as human persons with an intrinsic dignity, that's what we're owed, right? Ultimately, you have to think less of someone to be able to lie to them. That should be self-evident. And lies come in the form of silence sometimes too, right? Sins of omission. So as I watched these people defraud people and lie and cheat, and I was growing resentful. And resentment is, as anyone that deals with substance abuse or alcoholism, resentment is pretty much the death of your sobriety. Once that resentment starts brewing, you've already really relapsed, you know. And so it was this resentment that had led to the first one and the second one, and I hadn't caught it. I wasn't aware of it. And it wasn't until these people knowingly invited a convicted child molester to a movie set full of minors, full of children. that it just clicked with me that um, these people are liars. Um, this child molester was a potential investor, and it was a night shoot, and there were literally hundreds of children on set, and they knew exactly who he was. And even then, I didn't say anything. I didn't do anything about it, and I became very angry. So that anger went on for a good year. I still didn't act on it. I just festered. And eventually they, well, for quite a while they had been defrauding me of my wages and asking me to tear up contracts and for deferred pay and all these different things. And I eventually realized it didn't have anything to do with this clandestine war or, waiting until we're Marky Mark or Mel Gibson, and then we can come out and tell the truth and do these things and fight for good causes. It just had to do with money and status. That's what they wanted. And no matter how far you get in life in regards to money and status, there's always more you can get. And I realized that I had been lied to. I realized that none of this had anything to do with niceness or a clandestine war, building the idea that all of these various people that we were working with, all our different relationships, that they were, these sort of secret enemies, right? And us versus them mentality, building one monolith out of everyone on the other side, a Leviathan to fight. I realized that wasn't true in this context. But here's the catch. The resentment continued. As I went on and decided to try and do my own thing, the resentment continued. The relapses had increased in 6 years. It ended up being 6 relapses, and they were getting closer together. Now, after all this time of thinking about it and really meditating on it and figuring out what happened, I realized that I was the problem. It didn't have anything to do with these people. It had to do with my own silence and my own cowardice. The line between good and evil runs down the center of every human heart. And when you don't accept that, and you don't face that, you scapegoat. I think that's where that piece about remove the mote from your own eye before worrying about the splinter in your brother's. I think that's really a warning, more than it is a practical teaching. I think it's just kind of a warning. What happens when you don't do that? Well, you grow resentful and you scapegoat. I should have spoken truthfully. God's not asking us to be saints in some abstract future. He's asking us to be saints now, right now, to be the salt of the world right now. And I always knew that, but I didn't live in accord with my conscience. I didn't act out what I believed. I suppressed it and I made excuses for it. So I'm sorry to anyone that I ever had a dishonest conversation with, or anyone that I was duplicitous with, or subversive, anyone that I could have very easily just had honest conversations with. Genuine person-to-person conversations, regardless of what they might have thought of my beliefs, right? Because that's the price of a relationship. The price of a relationship, the dignity owed to them is that they get to make their own decision about what they believe and what they think about you. And I think that's a really fair system. So, and I think it's a big, to kind of blow up to a more macro level, I think that's kind of the problem with everything right now, with the politics that are so divisive. I think it's because there's an entire wing who accepted this idea that they were supposed to be relatively quiet, and that personal beliefs are supposed to be personal and not spoken openly. And you know, it's like we were playing a game that no one else was playing. You know, one set of rules for one side and a separate set of rules for another side. And I'm not here to tell you what you believe. You know, whoever you are out there, you know what you believe. I think we can all at least consciously recognize that media and film and TV, that there is definitely a value system that is promoted actively, right? I mean, I think that's the backlash with, any of the there's, the feminist thing, for instance, where, oh, they don't want to watch this movie because there's women in it and they hate feminism, or they hate women, well, no, it's an obvious propaganda of the feminist ideology. We love, lots of movies with women in them, but as soon as a movie with a woman in it becomes feminist propaganda, we don't want it. I don't. I guess I shouldn't say we. I don't. I personally, just so you know where I am, I'm a best I could describe it as a medieval moralist, right? My morals align with basically, the high medieval ages, which is sort of the height of ethics, in my opinion, and that runs all the way through, pretty much. I mean, it doesn't matter what the times say about it. I don't care. I like those conversations, though. I think that's kind of the big problem, is that those conversations aren't being had with any kind of honesty for most people. It's just kind of this like don't ask, don't tell policy, and it prevents the conversations from being had. I don't think most people are going to change their minds by having conversations anyway, but I still think they should be had, simply because due to our human dignity. I think for the most part, how you live is what you're going to believe. Belief is very, very much so rooted in the will. When I converted, I was a radical progressive and believed the party line, so to speak. And when I changed my mind, it was because I saw a completely new data set that, I kind of want to say it made more sense to me. But, that would be giving myself too much credit. It does make more sense. I don't even think I was smart enough to recognize that it made more sense right away. Ultimately, it's grace that can move your will. And I had hardened my heart for a long time. And in hindsight, I could see all those moments of grace missed. And then I don't know why. Nobody ever really knows why. I don't think this moment of grace is finally accepted. So the new data set then informs your conscience, informs what you believe, and you start to see all the logical consistency. And then you start to think, as you work through the apologetics and you work through this beautiful tapestry of truth, you want to share it and you want to argue those points with people. And the reality is, I don't think those arguments help change anyone's mind. But I think if they're not out there and breathing and living those beliefs, then nobody will ever have a chance. Grace can't be active in a situation where there's no material for it to act on, right? And that's the problem. It's not that there's not enough smart people arguing why abortion is murder, or why homosexual acts are intrinsically disordered, or why trans ideology is logically inconsistent, or Marxist identity politics are a sham, right? Like socialism, why it's intrinsically evil and an affront to human dignity. There's plenty of people that are out there making very consistent, very logical arguments. But there aren't enough people out there in the general population, in my field or a lot of fields, that are just open about those beliefs. And if there were, I think people would see that it's worth looking at. And maybe that grace can have something to act on. I guess more than anything, what I would hope that some of you might take from this, I already know how a lot of you are going to take this. I'm not even going to look at any of the responses online. I don't really care. But how a lot of you, I hope, what you might take from this is, I know a lot of the Catholics and non-Catholic Christians in Los Angeles. To all my brothers and sisters out there, I would hope that I have even promoted this lie of silence, and I'm sorry for that. I'm sorry for a lot of things, but don't be afraid. It might not even work out to your benefit. I suspect it's not going to for me. By benefit, I mean worldly benefit, financial gain or popularity or success or whatever your metrics are. Everyone has different attachments. My attachment was I loved my job. I was madly in love with my work. It's the only thing that kept me sane when I was a kid. All the things that I went through, all the horrors that I experienced, I never associated those with the work. The work was, in a way, kind of my safe space. It's what protected me psychologically, because I loved it so much. And so I didn't speak up because I didn't want to lose that. Let's face it, it's the coolest job in the world. I think a lot of people who aren't even in the industry would agree with that. It's one of the highest competitive industries that you can find. And people want to do it. People want to go make movies and TV shows and tell stories. Everyone has stories to tell. It's a really cool job. And I've spent 30 years now not just loving it and doing it, but also growing in that skill set, reading dozens and dozens of books on story theory and interactions with writers and how to deal with people and how to build projects together. It's fun. And the idea of doing something else was just impossible for me to even grapple with. To roll back, I know how a lot of people will respond to this and respond to anyone else that, right now at least, that comes out and decides to start living with integrity, living, aligned with their conscience, openly. And I would just say to those people, don't be afraid. There are a lot of people who, at least the kind of the louder minority, who will say, you're on the wrong side of history. And a lot of people with my moral beliefs would say the same thing about abortion or anything else. We can sling that mud back and forth at each other, and it doesn't really do any good. But at least from my side of things, it's also irrelevant. Maybe the world ends tomorrow, in which case, I would be on the wrong side of history. Maybe the world ends in 1,000,000 years and things swing back towards people living in accord with the natural law and basic human dignity and morality. In which case, all the propagandists in Hollywood will be on the wrong side of history. Ultimately, it's irrelevant, though. History is destined to be a footnote. right, to eternity. One note in an infinite symphony, just one single note. So I've decided I want to live for eternity. My wife and I, my wife, my wife is the most amazing woman in the whole world. I learned so much from her, and to have somebody who embraces you and supports you and loves you no matter what is the most empowering thing that you'll ever have. That's how our Lord deals with us in a lot of ways, so long as we're aiming for an ideal, right? Look, we're gonna fail, and you hear hypocrite a lot nowadays. All these hypocrites, and I think there's two. I called those people that I was talking about earlier. I would refer to them as hypocrites often, and there's a difference between aiming for an ideal and falling short repeatedly, and never giving up on the ideal, and then promoting an ideal and even enforcing an ideal that you have no interest in living yourself, right? You have no interest in pursuing personally. And that comes back around to that idea of the line of good and evil running through every human heart, right? I have an ideal. That's my judge. Because ultimately every ideal is a judge. And I think that's, the moralists all understand that. They might have different ideals. Those ideals might vary drastically. I would disagree with probably most conservatives on. They would consider me a radical, right, in regards to contraception or divorce, the grave evils of divorce. But I think the other side of the equation, the propagandists on the other side, and we're all propagandists to a certain degree, right? We all have bias. It's just up to each one of us individually to work on that and root that out. But what it looks like to me is that they don't want an ideal. They don't want any ideal. They want to deconstruct ideals, because if you let me have my thing, whether it's harming me or not, or whether it's harming other people, if you let me have my thing, then that means I'm going to let you have your thing. And that's looks to me like the unspoken thing. I think that's why the culture in Hollywood has become so rotten to the core, right? Why the Me Too movement had so much steam behind it. And Hollywood tends to draw people who are, narcissists, right? People who are intrigued by power and control. Storytelling is a powerful thing in itself, right? And so even the idea of wanting to tell great stories is a kind of control. I mean, there's a certain amount of, I want people to know me, because every story has the storyteller in it. So Hollywood draws those people, and I think those people, without a value system, those people become as corrupt as you can be. I think politics are a lot like that too, right? And so I think that's why those two realms have become so divisive. At least nowadays, I don't remember when I was a kid how contentious it was. I was of the same mindset as everyone else. They spoon-fed me my beliefs, and I believed them, and I never thought about them, and so I don't remember what anyone said about other things. It wasn't really in my purview. So I don't know if this is new or if it's always been like this. Now it's like, it's at the level of like witch hunts, right? Like, I had a potential business partner. I was going after some rights on a project, and this woman came in, and she had looked me up and realized that one of my investors was a Republican, right? Voted for Donald Trump, or was supporting Donald Trump. And of course, me and the people that I was working with, we all did that too. Um, and I'll vote for him again in 2020, a couple days, I guess. Um, but you can't talk about those things, right? And she laid into, I know who you are, and I know what kind of people you are, and I would never work with you kind of people. And then you got absorbed. Why she didn't just cancel the meeting, I don't know. She let us get all the way there, and then laid into this diatribe about, who we are, and I don't want to work with people like you. And I was like, wow, this is real. Like this is a real thing. And I don't know how long it's been like that. But I think the first step is not to retreat to separate corners, but to just speak openly, right? So while my friends and colleagues, were saying, "Shh, don't tell anyone that we voted for Donald Trump. Oh, our lives would be over, our careers would be over. Oh, it would be so horrible." I think that was the wrong approach. I think the right approach is like, this is just what we believe. I'm a Catholic. I'm a Catholic of a very narrow persuasion. I believe all of the truths of the Catholic faith. And by the way, this isn't, a lot of people out there want to say religion is a kind of escape. Being a Catholic is no escape right now. Let me tell you, it's harder to be a Catholic than a secularist. We've got rampant sexual abuse within the clergy. We've got homosexual bishops, a heretic pope. It's not exactly easy being a Catholic right now. But you hold on to what you believe, and you live in accord with the truth. And I think that's where peace is. I think peace is right in that place where your entire self is aligned. The tranquility of order of your faculties, right? The will, the intellect, the conscience, and then rooting out all of your vices, right? Rooting out all the things in the body that want more and more of this and that and whatever. So that's what I'm going to do. I want to go. I'm going to go just be a radical Catholic. Disappear to the Midwest and get a farm and just spend every day with my children. That's what I need to do for me, for my sobriety, because right now I know that I'm more than cancelable, although I'm canceling myself. So, gotcha. Cancel me now. And that's what I was afraid of. That's what I was afraid of was just being honest and what the consequences might be. Meanwhile, right now, today, in this day and age, there are places in the world where if you're honest, as a Catholic, as a Christian, you will be killed. Look that up. I mean, that's in the last, I don't know, I think like 10 years, and this is a guesstimate of the number I saw probably a year or something ago, but in the last 10 years, it's like 2.5 million Catholics and Eastern Christians have been killed for their beliefs. And I'm too afraid to lose a neat job. I think that's pathetic. I think it's pathetic, and I think that it doesn't merit any grace. So I'm going to go be a radical Catholic. I'm going to hang out with my family. And for the first time since that first day on Little Rascals, for the first time since then, I don't know what I'm going to do for a living. And that's very scary. But it's also exciting, liberating in a lot of ways. So, if any of you have any ideas, let me know. I want to end with a story because I talked a little bit about the sexual abuse that I experienced through my childhood and the horrors of that. And when you're a kid, you learn to stop thinking about it, but when you're a kid, you think about it. And um, how you feel is really hard to express even after coping with it and forgiving. And um, through my years uh, as a child actor, and into my teens, there were a few other child actors who did open up and talk about their experiences as well. Um, and one of them in particular overdosed when he was one of my best friends. He overdosed when he died when he was 25, I think, 27. And it's a big problem. Um, I think it's a bigger problem than the problem behind the Me Too movement and all of the evils of the casting couch culture. Um, Now, I don't want this to get conflated with the QAnon thing, because I think that has done more of a disservice to raising awareness of this problem. And I think it's strange, though, that it's, there were a few times over the years that I wanted to express this part of my history and my past, and to see if I could find a way to right some wrongs. First of all, I've worked to reconstruct those memories, and I have a deep fear of the wrong person ever being accused, and I don't have a clear enough memory from any of the events from my childhood to definitively point to any particular person. I've gone through IMDb and I've tried to reconstruct the truth around all of my horrible experiences. But if even one wrong person were accused, that would be unbearable for me. So before anyone goes and says, "Well, why aren't you going to the police or whatever?" That's why. And if that ever changes, if I ever suddenly become crystal clear on any of these predators or who any single one of them were, rest assured I'll have no problem taking that step. But I think it's strange that it's still a subject that is. It looks to me like it's a subject that's kind of mildly mocked. When Corey Feldman, who I worked with, when he opened up and talked a little bit about what happened to him, and quite a few child actors have actually come out and said things, and it just tends to get brushed under the rug. It's in the media for a day and then it's gone, and I think I don't know what that means. I think that's a problem. I think that's a problem, and I don't know why that is. I don't know if it's a taboo subject that makes people uncomfortable. I don't know if it's because the percentage of people who are aware of it is a high percentage, kind of like the casting couch culture in Hollywood. It was just universally known. I mean, when I was 18, I remember people talking about Kevin Spacey and his problems, right? So I mean, I would like to see an awareness of this issue become an acceptable narrative. I would like to see people coming out and talking about it. I don't know what to do beyond this video. Maybe something will come to me. I don't know. If there's anyone out there who runs any kind of programs that deal with this, or that try to raise awareness of this, or even in a broader scope, child sex trafficking, which, because of my experience as a kid, that's something that I've had an interest in studying and looking into, and the numbers are appalling. I mean, the numbers, the fact that it's not in the media every day is wild. Um, so, anyways, yeah, I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go off and do my own thing, and that's it. You know, I want to end with a quick story, and then I'll let you go back to whatever you're watching, whatever you're doing. Um, when I was in Vermont working on a development project. I was out there for a few days. I was meeting with a friend of mine who's a talented development executive, and we had been good friends for a long time. And he had a writing partner that had found this TV idea adapted from a book, and so I was out there working with them for a few days on it. And after a bunch of days of talking through the characters, and it's a very personal thing when you do that, and it's a very bonding experience. Um, it's easy to have great affection for the people you work for in my industry because you're really bearing yourself to them in a lot of ways. Um, so after it was all wrapped up, we were out at some pub. And I was having a burger, and this guy had a few too many drinks, and we got on the subject of existentialism, and God, the existence of God, came up. And as per usual, I was silent. I was a coward. I listened to him go on about the existence, and he was getting God's existence. He was getting kind of angry and riled up as he was going, and how God would have to contend with him if he ever saw God face to face, and that he would demand answers. And he kept circling back around to this idea that God allows bad things to happen. Where is God? That was the phrase he kept saying. Where was God when that little boy was being molested? And it was completely out of the blue. And I don't know his history, but I was a coward as per usual. I didn't say anything. I placated him, kind of patted him on the shoulder and said, "I hear you, buddy." And that was that. But what I wanted to say, I wanted to ask him first off, this molested child, this little boy that you're referencing, is that just the worst of all possible things, right? An abstraction to sum up your point, or is it influenced, motivated by some personal experience of yours, or some personal knowledge that you have? Because those are different conversations, obviously. But I was that little boy. For the better part of my childhood, I lived in this horrible fear and darkness, and I don't ask God where he was. I know God, and I know where he was. He was right there with me. He was suffering in me and suffering in the perpetrator, the predator that was abusing me. And that's a greater horror to me than even what I experienced personally. The idea that God suffers. And that's I think the takeaway. I'm sorry to him because I might have been able to help him understand something he didn't understand, which is that God suffers perfectly in us. We get the benefit of disassociative, the disassociation from the event and confusion, and God doesn't. He suffers it perfectly. So I don't wonder where he was. And the reason he suffers it is so that our suffering can be redeemed. So that there's a place where that suffering can become deified, right? It can be transformed into glory and strength and greatness. So today's the feast day of Christ the King, which is a fitting time for me to make this video. So that's it. That's all I have to say about this. And to all of my friends and colleagues who might see this video or hear about it and be confused or angry or saddened or feel betrayed, I really do love everybody. I don't have any hatred for anyone. I have a lot of hatred for ideas. I think there are some really horrible, evil ideas that have hurt so many people. But I don't hate anybody. I already know I'm going to get all the obias, the phobias, the transphobia, and I'm going to be called a racist and a sexist, and I've seen all the labels that can be thrown out, and that's okay. That's part of the dignity of every human person. Is I tell the truth, and you get to tell the truth, right? I tell the truth, and you get to make a decision. God respects your free will, even unto hell. So, albeit for me to, not do that, that wouldn't be. I don't think that wouldn't be the right thing to do. So, anyways, this is taking a little out of me, and I'm going to call it now. But is there anything else? Because this is it. I'm out after this, so I'll make sure I've said it all. I guess that's it. If you're Catholic and you'd like to pray for me, please do. And if you got good vibes for me or happy thoughts, or Protestant prayers, I am grateful for the sentiment. I don't believe in the efficacy of any of those things, but I am grateful. I'm grateful to have you think about me and wish me well. So, and I wish you well. And I'm excited. I'm gonna go be a radical Catholic. And that's what I wanted to say. One of the seeds that started this. There are no examples of silent saints. How is that not immediately evident, right? There are no silent saints. No one was canonized because they snuck around and were secretive about their beliefs. There aren't any. And you can say the martyrs and the underground church during the Roman persecutions. I'm not talking about secretly going to mass. I'm talking about speaking the truth when the opportunity presented itself. That's all the saints. All of the saints were extremists. All of the saints were radicals. You hear the term radicalization a lot, and in some religions that means you become a murderer. Radicalized Catholics become saints. So, Viva Cristo Rey.